keep track of every single one of her frustrating statements on a timeline that would inevitably be all over the place, I'm going to sort of section things off and talk about how she's handled sexual assault allegations against coworkers and things of that nature. Then her comments about race, how she's treated animals, the projects and businesses she has worked on. You kind of get the picture. But we're going to go ahead and start off real heavy with the comments on sexual assault. One man Dunham is close with, Marie Miller, wrote Girls in 2017 and was accused of sexually assaulting actress Aurora Perrineau. She claims to have woken up to him raping her after a night of socializing when she was 17, and she didn't consent to it in any way. Whether or not Dunham believed Aurora doesn't matter. She deserves to be heard for her case to be taken seriously too, and investigated with any other woman that steps forward. And yet, as the news broke, Lena Dunham stated that she was confident the accusation had been misreported. Is that so, Lena? What is it that made you so confident? Were you there? Were you with Miller that night? Well, in Lena's first statement, she actually does claim to be, and along with her co-star Jenny Connor, wrote, "While our first instinct is to listen to every woman's story, our insider knowledge of Murray's situation makes us confident that sadly this accusation is one of the 3% of assault cases that are misreported each year," they said. "It is a true shame to add to that number, as outside of Hollywood, women still struggle to be believed. We stand by Murray, and this is all we will be saying about this issue." Well, as it turns out, that was a lie. She had no insider knowledge, none whatsoever, but lied to discredit Aurora. This is undoubtedly one of the worst things I think she's done. It's not some drama. This is an alleged crime. I know it's absolutely devastating to think that someone you're close to, maybe friends with, who could be capable of such a thing, and I'm not saying that Lena Dunham needed to come out, call him guilty, and start bashing Miller. The case was ongoing, therefore no one, not the victim or accused, should be discredited. It's so difficult for victims of this type of crime to step forward because of the scrutiny they come under after going through such a traumatic event. Lena Dunham can't call herself a feminist and then go around making these types of lies to defend someone she simply can't know if they're innocent or not. I will say that primarily due to the statute of limitations, as well as some inconsistencies in victim, suspect, and witness statements, the case did not move forward. So I've got absolutely no idea what happened here, and as such, I don't think Aurora should be called a liar. Lena did apologize later, stating, "Every woman who comes forward deserves to be heard fully and completely, and our relationship to the accused should not be part of the calculation anyone makes when examining her case." He found this very hollow, though, especially when you consider that only a few months before, she tweeted that women don't lie about rape, standing with the many women stepping forward in the wake of the Me Too movement. It's just an extremely hypocritical moment in her history where she says women don't lie and wants to appear like an ally or progressive, then the moment someone she knows is accused, her stance changes. After all, Lena's gone on and on about how important it is to listen to women when Bill Cosby was accused of raping women, and yet she won't listen to Aurora? How can the same person lie to discredit Aurora also state, "I feel like women just not being listened to is what's the scariest. Bill Cosby is just a symbol for a situation that's so obvious, and yet people don't stand up and say, 'This is crazy, we should do something about it.'" Even now, people resist it, even when Cosby says he gave them Quaaludes. I still get tweets every day where people are like, "Innocent until proven guilty." Hell, she even went so far as to say that when people told her she was obsessed with the case, it was like saying she was obsessed with the Holocaust. I agree with Refinery 29's take on this, as they state, Dunham makes a strong statement here. We tend to look the other way and give powerful men a free pass to abuse that power, and often discredit the women making claims against them. It's a huge problem, and comparing suffering is never an easy analogy to make, but it's troublesome to draw lines to mass genocide. All in all, I understand why this Miller-Aurora situation made so many people furious with Dunham. Do not pretend to stand by anyone if, the moment the belief is tested, you're going to turn your back on them. That's really shitty. But, as we'll soon see, this is in fact a pattern for Lena Dunham, and she makes infuriating, tone-deaf, harmful comments only to apologize and then continue making those comments. However, one of the biggest scandals in this vein of sexual assault is what Lena Dunham admitted to doing to her younger sister in her book, Not That Kind of Girl. Here are just a few passages from her book. I shared a bed with my sister Grace until I was 17 years old. She was afraid to sleep alone and would begin asking me around 5 p.m. every day whether she could sleep with me. I put on a big show of saying no, taking pleasure in watching her beg and sulk, but eventually I always relented. Her sticky, muscly body thrashed beside me every night as I read Anne Sexton, watched reruns of SNL, sometimes even as I slipped my hand into my underwear to figure some stuff out. Passage 2 reads, "Do we all have uteruses?" I asked my mother when I was 7. "Yes," she told me, "we're born with them, and with all our eggs, but they start out very small, and they aren't ready to make babies until we're older." I looked at my sister, now a slim, tough 1-year-old, and her tiny belly. Her eggs inside her, like a sack of spider eggs in Charlotte's Web, and her uterus, the size of a thimble. "Does her vagina look like mine?" "I guess so," my mother said, "just smaller." One day, as I sat in our driveway in Long Island playing with blocks and buckets, my curiosity got the best of me. Grace was sitting up, babbling and smiling, and I leaned down between her legs and carefully spread open her vagina. She didn't resist, and when I saw what was inside, I shrieked. My mother came running. "Mama, Mama, Grace has something down there." My mother didn't bother asking why I had opened Grace's vagina. This was within the spectrum of things that I did. She just got on her knees and looked for herself. It quickly became apparent that Grace had stuffed 6 or 7 pebbles in there. My mother removed them patiently while Grace cackled, thrilled that her prank had been a success. As for the passage 3, it states, "As Grace grew, I began bribing her for her time and affection. $1 in quarters if I could do her makeup like a motorcycle chick. 3 pieces of candy if I could kiss her on the lips for 5 seconds. Whatever she wanted to watch on TV if she would just relax on me." Basically, anything a sexual predator might do to woo a small suburban girl I was trying. Really what I wanted, beyond affection, was to feel that she needed me, that she was helpless without her big sister leading her through the world. I took a perverse pleasure in delivering bad news to her, the death of our grandfather, a fire across the street, hoping that her fear would drive her into my arms, would make her trust me. First of all, the amount of times I nearly threw up reading those 3 passages is just good lord. But the other thing is, if Lena Dunham was denouncing her behavior as a growing child who was touching her sister inappropriately, I may not have made such a massive issue about this, although it's still really fucking weird. But what's incredibly messed up here is not only was she sharing a bed until she was 17, which is obviously old enough to understand that what she was doing was wrong, but she was using her younger sister for sexual pleasure. And she defended her actions to people and said that the stories of her molesting her sister are upsetting and disgusting. You know what's also disgusting, Lena? Defending behavior that you yourself refer to as perverse. She has enough self-awareness to call her actions perverse, but the second she's called out on them, it's not fair. What's equally upsetting is that a lot of articles coming out around this time, particularly one from Vox, turns it into something political and how right-leaning politics accuse Dunham of molesting her sister, whereas the left criticizes her for rich white girl privilege. Like, what does that have to do with anything? This isn't about what conservatives think about her or what liberals think about her. It's about how Lena Dunham told the world she was touching her sister and then got angry when people called her out on it. Ready to Glare, shout out to the homegirl, love her, what a doll. But anyway, she talks about this situation specifically in one of her videos, and it will be available on my sources if you want to see another take on this whole thing, and I think she did an excellent job on it. But in every single one of these passages from her book, Lena admits that she does, and yet, as far as I can tell, never says, "This was messed up and I wish I learned about my sexuality at a younger age so I knew not to treat my sister this way." Now, I could be wrong. Maybe she says it later in the book, but judging from her reactions to being called out, I don't think so. Whether you call this abuse or not, whether you call it normal childhood development or not, I'm not a child psychologist, so I can't be the judge of that. But from my own perspective, all I can say is that I disagree with how this was handled and how this was presented. It could have been so easy to say, hey, my sister gave me consent to write this, which she did. I was exploring my sexuality at a young age, but I'm not trying to condone using younger siblings for that. I understand that these types of behaviors can also be done with malicious intent. Something along those lines, but that didn't happen. Lena Dunham has not only been accused of this, but hipster racism as well. The term was used by writer Zinzi Clemens. She stated, "It's time for women of color, black women in particular, to divest from Lena Dunham." Zinzi Clemens tweeted, followed by a long statement in which she revealed that she has known Dunham since the two ran in the same circles in college. She said they had mutual acquaintances. "Back in college, I avoided those people like the plague because of their well-known racism," she wrote. "I'd call their strain hipster racism, which typically uses sarcasm as a cover, and in the end, it looks a lot like gaslighting. It's just a joke. Why are you overreacting?" is a common response to these types of statements. She claimed that one female in Lena's circles was known to use the N-word in conversation in order to be provocative, and if she was ever called on it, she would say it's just a joke. "I was often in the same room with her, but I never spoke to her, only watched her from far in anxiety and horror." Clemens left Lenny Letter, a weekly feminist letter created by Lena Dunham after Dunham lied to support Miller. More and more in recent years, as people have called out her show for racism and pretending to be this woke feminist program while having so few people of color in it, Lena Dunham has said that she was, quote, "so busy thinking so much about representing weirdo and chubby girls and strange half-Jews that she'd forgotten there was an entire world of women who were being underserved," end quote. For many, though, her statements and apologies fall short, as they often do. In the 2016 at the Met Gala, she was secretly upset that New York Giants wide receiver Odom Beckham Jr. wasn't paying attention to him. Lena Dunham wrote about how he paid her no attention and said that he probably determined she was not the shape of a woman by his standards. Not only is that a massive assumption to make, but one response by Preston Mitchum hit the nail on the head. Lena Dunham is upset because Odell Beckham Jr. didn't objectify her, but would she have been upset if he did? Based on nothing more than one look, Dunham assumed she knew everything that Odell Beckham was thinking. She didn't attempt to initiate conversation, he never said a word to her. As one source writes, "Maybe Beckham doesn't know who Dunham is. Maybe Beckham didn't feel like speaking to anyone. Maybe Beckham knew who she was and intentionally chose not to interact with her. All of these things are possible. But the only likely scenario that made sense to Dunham was that he wasn't attracted to her sexually. Because that is the only way that she saw him, as a black buck there for her choosing, who had somehow rejected her, in her head." Slate, another news source that commented on this, got it horribly wrong by suggesting that perhaps Beckham is gay. First, Beckham's sexuality isn't an issue. Dunham's projection is. Further is the thought that any cis-heterosexual black man in Dunham's presence would have been interested in her sexually. So perhaps Beckham is gay because he was not interested? She had just been grinding on Jordan, so that can't be the correct conclusion. Second, again, this isn't about black men. It's about Dunham's obsession with and the fetishization of them, which she is well aware. Dunham has literally written before that you could bounce a quarter off that butt when talking about Barack Obama, and I wish I was joking. She claims to be a feminist and yet doesn't see the hypocrisy in objectifying and sexualizing someone else, the president at the time no less. And then, when a black man doesn't objectify her, she assumes it's because he doesn't see her as a real woman? Another tweet went out that hilariously says, "It's ironic Lena Dunham said there aren't black people on her show because she can't write them truthfully, but now she can read our minds." Even when she apologized to Odell, it was extremely victimizing, stating how she had so many insecurities about her body. She was surrounded by swan-like actresses, and it was hard for her not to feel like a sack of flaming garbage. Dunham still hasn't learned that one of the massive issues people have with her is her hypocrisy, where she claims to stand against behavior that she herself takes part in. She complains that there isn't a single black member out of the 87 in the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, a valid criticism, but she claims it's her attraction to Drake that doesn't make her racist. And I'm not kidding. One source states, the more Dunham has spoken over the years, the more she has become the stock photo for white feminism. A highly suspect strand that cannot exist unless the white person in question is speaking about herself, no matter what the larger issue is. Dunham, in effect, cannot talk about abortion or racism unless she makes it about herself and annotates it with an example, no matter how inane, involving her. If you're wondering what the abortion remark is about, it's because she also has said in the past that she wished she had an abortion. Her apology for that was, yet again, to victimize herself and say her words were spoken from a delusional girl persona that she often inhabits. Also tried to get people to vote in 2012 by making a video called Your First Time, where she compares voting to losing your virginity, trying to get the youth to vote, which, again, crosses the line from questionable into what the fuck are you doing territory. There's also been controversy around her being hired to work on a Syrian film with this history, but I would say the issue here is with Spielberg and those that chose to hire her more than Dunham herself. According to my source, the movie